Hey, well, thank you for joining us for our second panel. And Victoria, thanks for moderating the first. And Wendy, thanks also for prioritizing this conversation on the agenda today because, as we saw in your notes, that women in technology is a very important conversation as we think about economic development and women's entrepreneurship across Canada. I know we have a couple of new faces on our panel, so I'm very grateful to be joined by all of you. And I'm going to just let you introduce a little bit about yourself and your journey and what motivated each of you to enter into this sector. And what some of the structural or cultural barriers you faced as you've navigated through this journey. And Kathleen, I'm going to start at my far end and start with you.
Thank you. Hello. Kathleen Powderly. I'm a woman entrepreneur. I run a communications firm, but I specialize in supporting a lot of women-led tech companies as well as defense. I also do work with research and knowledge mobilization around that. My journey started, I will say, when I was younger, I did not envision being in communications. I actually thought I would go into the military. My mother was in the Air Force, and she was a military police officer within the Air Force over 50 years ago. When I was younger, I said, I want to be like you. I want to do what you did. She had stopped when I was younger, and she forbade me. She said, absolutely not. Don't do it. Can you please be a legal secretary? You can work in a doctor's office as a secretary. I'm aging myself. That's back then that's the terminology that was used. She said, please do not go into a male-dominated field. I said, okay, fine. I'm going to be a photojournalist. I thought I'd be a photojournalist. I said, I'm going to go into journalism. I did go into media for a while. I cannot take pictures very well, but I was encouraged to, continue my storytelling journey, and was told and encouraged that I was good at that. So that's what I did. That's why I ended up being in communications. And I like to, when describing myself, say I can take complex ideas, whether it's research, whether it's innovation technologies, and make it accessible. Because if we don't make it accessible for my clients or for others, we cannot expand our businesses. We cannot get investment. We cannot do trade. So that's my journey. Some of the barriers, I'll say, especially back when I was doing first doing tech, it was VC, male-dominated field, but I was brought in to help, the startup companies tell their story for, their series, whichever series of funding it was going to be, to help bring that technology to life. However, I'm not a computer scientist. I don't have a PhD. And a lot of times in the room, I would walk in and they'd say, there's no way you can understand this. You don't understand. There's no way you can do this. So that was a big barrier for sure. On the defense side, I got to it in a roundabout way. I went through the international development way. There's a lot more women in that field. I worked for UNICEF for several years. But again, the barriers, unless you have boots on the ground, unless you've experienced that, unless you've been in the forces, it's very hard to communicate to military, even government, DND in some cases here, or US military, wherever you are. So it was a barrier to get in, but I found a way in. I went through UNICEF and got my field experience and my boots on the ground.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks so much, Kathleen. Thank you. Cynthia, I'm going to pass it on over to you just to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, talk a little bit about why you got into the sector and some of the opportunities or some of the barriers that you have faced along your journey.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Igbinanu. I am the CEO of Informanas Analytics and Artificial Intelligence, Inc. We are located in Kingston, Ontario. It's a small business. We ventured into it 3 years ago now and been learning a lot. My background is in sciences. I have a computer science background. That was my very first degree. I am an immigrant, was a newcomer many years ago, moved here after my first degree and some work experience from Nigeria. Um, I've worked in the IT space I worked in the IT space for over a decade in different roles, and HR as well. And so 3 years ago, my husband and I decided that, you know what, we're putting in so much into our work and we really enjoy what we do. If we take that same passion and that same energy and we put it into something that we can put our own DNA in, maybe we can unlock opportunities for other people who are like us, newcomers, people at the intersection of diversity, and just kind of show that we can also make it, even though we're in a new space. And so we, came together and started talking about what it is that are our passion. And we came up with, analytics and AI. And around the same time, we also found an opportunity. We had tried entrepreneurship for the many years that I've been in Canada. We've done all kinds of things. We've tried all kinds of business ideas that have not necessarily worked out. And so we found an entry, and that entry was there was a gentleman who had been doing some small scale analytics work with legal firms, developing HR tools for them, and he wanted to step out of business and retire, and we thought that that was going to be a great opportunity for us to get in, leverage the clients that he has, and kind of build our portfolio there, and that's what we've been doing. Did I ever think that I would be doing what I'm doing today? No. Like many of you, imposter syndrome is real. Even with all my background and experience, I still question myself, are you really supposed to be, sitting at this table and saying the things that you're saying? And then I look at the people or the men who are in this sector, and I'm way qualified, more qualified, and they are just talking the loudest. And I think for me, that's really part of why I decided to really step in. And I also want to do a quick shout out to the men in our communities who are also our champions. I want to shout out to my husband because he said to me, you are going to lead this company. And I said, well, you have better experience and you talk about it better. And he goes, no, you have actually all the experiences that you need. And he kept pushing me forward and kept saying, you are going to lead the company. And, we signed all the papers. It put my name on there. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to step up. But every time I step up and I talk about things, I realize I've always known this. It's not like, I'm just, kind of saying things. It's always been there, but it's just not having enough access or people who believe enough in you. And so I really just want to call out those people who would believe in us and who would say, you got this, you can do it, step into that table because you've earned it and you deserve it. And so for me, that's why I'm here. Some of the barriers that I've seen in my space, AI is still very new. We're all still trying to figure it out. I don't think anyone really is an expert in this field because it continues to change and it's rapidly changing on a daily basis. But for me as a new business and a Black-owned business, it's really building that credibility to say, I know what I'm doing and I can do this job. And so finding those opportunities and those contacts, where I can actually step in and do stuff. And for me, any contract or opportunity that I get, I'm going to give it like 1,000% because I want to be able to tell my story differently. I want to be able to tell the story that, hey, you don't have to be a certain way. You can actually still do great work and really, really make a great impact. And so some of the barriers is that access to opportunities, not being at the tables where the decisions are being made, not being represented at those tables, access to funding, that's the biggest one, especially in my community. I talk with other people who are like me, and it's like, it's not there. And even when you try, there's all these barriers and, that you kind of have to go through. And so it's really, those are some of the things. But are there opportunities? I am excited. I am super excited, especially in the field of AI, with the opportunities that are there. And I love what was being talked about earlier. The gap could be enlarged or kind of shrunk. And I'm excited about the opportunities for people who are not normally at the table, people who don't normally have access to do certain things, being able to bridge that divide and leveraging AI to bring everyone together. Sorry that I talked too much.
No, we can certainly feel your passion. So thank you so much. And Phyllis, I'd like to welcome you into the conversation to share a little bit who you are and what you do and talk about some of the barriers or challenges that you've had to overcome in your sector.
Perfect. Thank you. I think it's still morning. Good morning, everyone. Phyllis McCollum. I am currently the Senior Program Manager of Research and Knowledge Mobilization at the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council. My role is doing research on labor market information, so understanding the labor gap that we have in the agriculture sector, mostly in primary agriculture, so on-farm producing food for our nation and abroad. Personally, I have been in agriculture my entire life. I was raised on a cow-calf operation just an hour east of the city. I now farm myself with my partner and our toddler twin girls. And so we are incredibly invested in the sector. Part of my education and my personal activities are always involved in the agricultural space. I was fortunate enough to spend some time out west pursuing my degree in agricultural economics, where I learned a lot about Western agriculture and how it differs from what we do here in Ontario and Quebec, where most of my experience was. But now with my work through CARC, we also have a Women in Ag portion and project that we work on intensely to ensure that women in the sector have opportunities. And I think that's probably what I'll talk most about today is just through that work, we facilitate women connecting, networking, and learning. And so, the opportunities are out there, and I I have been able and been fortunate, like you mentioned, to have men in my corner who have pushed me. My first few jobs were with very encouraging men, and so I've had those opportunities to take on aspects that I probably wouldn't have been at the table for, even given sort of my young age at the time. I've had the opportunity to travel and to be in rooms with people who were much more knowledgeable than I was, and make those connections globally. And I think the opportunity for women is when it's granted to you, take that seat. I have often encouraged other ladies who colleagues and those who I work with, to come to tables with us, if that's the boardroom table, if that's an event, if it's a dinner that you may not feel that you were, welcomed at. If there is opportunity, please do take it. Having the feeling that you aren't supposed to be there. There is opportunity for everyone at every table, and bringing more chairs and making more space is always what I intend to do. We've Through the ag sector, a lot of the folks that I work with closely aren't invested in agriculture personally as well. They're working for the ag sector, but may not be farming. And so, you feel like a little bit of a duck out of water when you're entering a new sector that you don't, you're passionate about food production, but you're learning. And so, I've always encouraged, women who have come into our organizations to come and join and experience things. In the farming sector, we do a lot of farm tours, and I have put my farm up as an opportunity. I worked for BlackBerry for a year, and the team of 12 of us, I was the only one who had ever been on a farm, let alone run one. And so they came to the farm and experienced what farming was in Ontario. And so There's lots of opportunity. Barriers still exist in agriculture. We are seeing things change, but there is still, much like many other sectors, the old boys club. But we do some research work in this space, and we are seeing change. Women owning farm operators, women owning businesses has increased, and those who are highly educated has also doubled in about the last 10 years. So there are changes coming, and it's just seeking those opportunities and really taking what is available and not being afraid to be at the table with the old boys because there's opportunity for everyone.
Thank you, Phyllis and Andrea. I'm going to pass it over to you with the same question, talking about the sector that you're in, what prompted you to get into this, and what some of the barriers are that you're facing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shannon. So I'm Andrea Guest, and I lead Femtech Canada in our day-to-day operations. Femtech Canada is a national organization that represents over 200 founders innovating in women's health. We are now the third largest femtech ecosystem globally, props Canada. And Femtech Canada is a pretty young organization. We only started about 3 years ago. And when we first started Femtech Canada, there was only about 54 companies in Canada, startups that were working in the women's health space. And now we're seeing over 200. So huge amount of growth in this sector. And really proud to say that 88% women in leadership in this sector. So compared to other tech clusters, huge amount of women represented at the table. I am not the founder of Femtech Canada, but I'm so fortunate to be the first person employed to be a part of this team. So I work really hand in hand with the founder of bringing this vision to life. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the precipice for Femtech Canada and the barriers, because it more equally represents the entrepreneurs that we represent in that community. And so the founder herself is a Femtech entrepreneur. Her name's Rachel Bartholomew, and she created a company called High Ivy. And in scaling her company, recognized that she was a part of a lot of life science programs that did not equally represent or understand the opportunities and barriers within women's health. And I'll talk about some of those in a second. And so she looked around and said, there is actually no program Canada-wide for people innovating within women's health. It's a massive opportunity, but we're just streamlining folks and saying that women's health is just the same as a general other company. And the reason it's not, and to speak to the barriers, is that in Canada, women were not required to be a part of clinical trials till 1997. And so that means that entrepreneurs working in this space are building off of fundamental research that does not exist. They are starting 50 yards behind the start line compared to their life science counterparts and having to generate their own evidence base. And this is systematic as they commercialize their products, right? They then go to raise their first round of funding, and the people in the room are looking for due diligence. They're looking for comparables in an industry that is so young and research that does not exist that they become a risk to invest in. We know that in Canada, about 4% of VC funding goes to women entrepreneurs. You'll remember that I just said 88% of founders in Femtech are women. But we say there's a double barrier, right? Not only are these women founders, but they're building products for women. So the people around the table don't only have the evidence, but they don't understand the problems, or they can't relate firsthand to the cases that these women are building for. And then they need to commercialize their products into a medical system, into benefit plans that have not been designed for women's health. The education that our practitioners have received based on the research that fundamentally isn't there doesn't equally represent women. So there are multiple barriers for people operating within the women's health innovation space, but for every barrier, there is mass amount of opportunity. In my mind, there is no other sector that targets 50% of the world's population and has abundance of white space. There is so much opportunity for innovation in this space. And recently, McKinsey released a report specific to Canada that said closing the gender health gap in Canada is a $37 billion annual opportunity that could be achieved by 2040, and named innovation as a key piece to closing that health gap. So that's all about what we do at Femtech Canada and some of the barriers. If you'd love to hear my personal story, I'd love to chat at the break, but I really wanted to highlight what the entrepreneurs in our ecosystem face.
Thank you for highlighting some of those barriers. And I didn't realize that it wasn't until 1997 that women weren't part of the actual clinical trials. You also said the word possibility. And Cynthia, you also mentioned the word possibility. And I want to maybe change the order of our questions a little bit. But I want to ask you, what are your projections regarding changing technologies and the impact of AI? So are there things that excite you, things that frighten the heck out of you? Where are the opportunities and where are the threats as it relates to changing technologies and the impact of AI specifically in your industries? I'll start with you, Cynthia. Yeah.
All right. I think that's a really great question. The one main opportunity that I see is productivity gains. AI is definitely changing every industry, every job, and it is bringing about great productivity change. And really quickly, for example, for me, where even though I have a computer science background, I didn't really focus on coding in my earlier career. I focused on other aspects. But now that I run a business where I also, because I'm a small business owner, I also need to get into the code. Oftentimes in building service tools for organizations, I leverage AI on a regular basis and easily saves me 10 to 15 hours per week. In our trainings, we also provide AI trainings for organizations and business professionals in small cohorts so that people can actually practice what they're learning and have a project that they can take away to say, we've done this. We've seen a lot of our students and people who have graduated from our training program report an upwards of 20 hours plus in savings as a result of the productivity gains that they've used because of AI. So that's a lot of the opportunities. I think everybody in every sector should find ways to leverage this technology and really use it because then when you save that time, you're able to do more value add things. The other thing in terms of what did you say? Challenges?
What's exciting to you or what's frightening and how are things changing? What impacts are you seeing?
Right. So that's the things that's exciting me in my field. And I could talk about so many more, but that's the one that I see on a regular basis and applies to everyone. Whatever it is that you're doing, AI can help you. AI can make it better as long as you leverage it the right way. What frightens me though in that field also is the bias, right? Like what's I can't read your name. What Angela said in terms of the research data available in your sector, the data that's the AI systems and tools are being trained on is inherently biased a lot against women, right? Because women have not always been out there in the World Wide Web putting things out there. More men are doing it. And then when you go into the intersectionality as well, it even becomes less and less, especially if you're indigenous or Black or people of color or 2S LGBTQ, or, you can kind of go down that path. And so the technology itself is very biased. And so one of the things that we're doing, majority of the people that we train are also newcomers, because we also want more representation, and we're encouraging people, go out there, research these tools, put your work out there as much as you can, so that at least the tools and the technology can have more diverse data that's available. The other thing too is the hallucination, and most of you most likely have experienced AI hallucination in one way or the other, where you've used this technology, but it's giving you like completely incorrect data or information, and you're like, where did you get this from? Well, generative AI, that's what it does. It creates new content. If it can't find what you're looking for, it will create it for you. And depending on your sector, that is dangerous, right? And so that's also one of the challenges, is we need people with domain knowledge, and men, women have domain knowledge, like we've got it, right? And so getting in there, looking at what it's, spitting out, and, using your domain knowledge to what they call context engineering or prompt engineering, to kind of prompt it until it gives you what you need, would be key. But those are some of the challenges that I also see, or things that frighten me.
Thank you for that context too, and I appreciate you brought a couple of things that the minister talked about, just even the safety with deep fakes. And I don't know how many people I've spoken to today, and we all said, "How are you?" And we all said, "Oh, busy." You think about the time savings that AI can bring to us, and also that women are well positioned. And I think it was Wendy that was saying this earlier, bringing those critical thinking skills and being able to recognize good knowledge. Kathleen, you work with a lot of different entrepreneurs. You've been supporting them through this journey as well. I want to talk a little bit from your perspective. What scares you when it comes to this changing technology, AI, generative AI? What scares you and what's exciting you right now? What are you seeing?
I love AI. I think it helps with time management, especially when you're looking at with the entrepreneurial hat on. We just don't have time and resources. But the frightening part, or I love it, but I think having that human touch or that second review, double checking, skills development within AI, which Wendy talks about a lot, understanding how to use it, right? So, and using it safely within frameworks. I know Diversity Institute research has shown that, employees are using it without guidance within the workplace. Employers aren't aware of it. So I think it's great. I think it's, the digital divide is lessened. For me, with my technology clients, having everyday Canadians, having kids even using AI, it makes technology more accessible. It makes it less scary. So generative AI, at least, I think is a game changer, because it will bring the adoption issue in Canada is huge. I know Wendy talks about that a lot. But if we can start using AI, then the other technologies aren't as scary. So for that, I'm excited about. I am concerned about cybersecurity issues, sovereignty. Having been to Ukraine twice, with my defense entrepreneur client, who's medical technology side, we're working with different technologies. Interoperability is an issue, but when you're looking at defense and trying to protect information, in this case, where is that patient going from which place to what area, when you're on the front lines, what the movements are, that's really scary for me, because that's life or death. So I think that would be the biggest one. I think adoption, accessibility for entrepreneurs too, the competition with that, there's off the shelf, but I'm concerned that SMEs won't have the supports unless we push for it with the government in terms of getting that performance. I think training is really good. used it for training. We've used it on the defense side, medical technology side, because it's not safe in some situations for us to go to certain areas. So being able in low risk situations to use AI on if there's a connectivity issue, if you're training in this scenario, what should I do with this patient for vital sign monitoring, things like that. I think that's amazing and it's important. And training, you can do 100, 200, you can do 5 units of 12, get training done in 20 minutes compared to one-on-one, the time it takes to get to wherever you have to get to. So, and time is of the essence.
Thanks, Kathleen. Phyllis, I want to bring it back to the agriculture sector. How is changing technology changing the sector? What are your projections for it, and where do you see the opportunities and maybe even things that are keeping you up at night around this?
Yeah, so a few things on repeat here from my colleagues on the panel. The productivity gains will be huge for agriculture. One piece to think about before we sort of have this conversation is the average age of farmers in Canada is 58. So adoption is a problem. Now, I don't want to say that if you are over the age of 58, you can't adopt technology. My dad is 72. He's learned how to text, teach an old dog new tricks. But there's much more to the conversation than just dropping technology into a farming operation. We have location issues. We have broadband, Wi-Fi, cellular connection in some rural areas of our country that is non-existent. We have infrastructure capital investment problems and concerns. Some of this technology does not just require a few $100s and away it goes. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you are getting towards the end of what may be your farming career, does it make sense to innovate? These are some of the questions that we consider. The opportunities are huge for those who are getting into the sector, who are, working at building their businesses. I was in a greenhouse in Southern Ontario, 30 acres under glass. So much innovation, so much. Everywhere I turned, there was another piece of equipment. And this also speaks to the labor market issue we have. We are short workers. Everywhere. It doesn't matter the sector. It doesn't matter the location. The agriculture sector is definitely struggling with having enough people working. And so innovation makes sense for a lot of our producers to bring in machinery. Now, when we talk about this, it's like, okay, well, we're going to bring in the machine that's going to replace the person that's standing there currently doing it physically. Not necessarily. I still need someone to install, repair, and monitor this piece of machinery. So now we have this discussion about skills and the development of skills. And so the person who may have been picking something manually or doing something manually now needs a skill upgrade so he can monitor the machine, which is now doing the piece of work for him. So it's a really big conversation in agriculture. The opportunities are endless. I think there's also opportunity as a tech sector to grow in Canada. We are behind when it comes to the other countries who do ag tech. A lot of the technology we acquire is from Europe. And in COVID, that was a significant challenge because we couldn't get technicians into the country to fix machinery. So a lot of our producers who had breakdowns were like YouTubing and FaceTiming their solutions with the techs on the other side of the world because we just couldn't get them into the country. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
Give you 30 more seconds here. I'm sorry, Phil.
Frightening things is cybersecurity. We don't know, a lot of producers don't understand what they have and what others have access to. And so ensuring the Wi-Fi password is secure is a good thing. And so these pieces are really important to ensuring that the data we're collecting and the products that we're using are safe, and it's keeping not only our producers safe, but the companies that collect this information and all of that kind of stuff.
Sorry to cut you off there, Phyllis. We have got time, Andrea, for you to take us home on this question. Just for your industry, where are you seeing some of those opportunities, some of the threats, particularly in your sector? Thank you.
Yeah, I think AI, it's such a hot topic right now, and I think healthcare in general, I think AI has the potential to do what happened to do what electricity did for manufacturing in the healthcare sector. There's huge amount of potential here. And I won't stress the point, but I think the scary part is within women's health is that we are currently training algorithms on research that fundamentally excludes women. It fundamentally excludes people of color. It fundamentally excludes marginalized people. And so are we perpetuating the divide? Are we going to expand the gender health gap? And we're running at 200 miles when we're missing fundamental frameworks. Now, I was with some colleagues just last week at the Institute of Gender and Health at CIHR, and they told me that there's some fantastic work going on at NELA and in Toronto and a few other sites of researchers who are dissecting algorithms and making sure that they do have a gender lens to them. But as we heard at the start that Wendy pointed out, we're really great at research in Canada. Where we're laggard is adoption, right? So it's great that this work is going on, but how do we then scale those algorithms, commercialize them, pull them out of those academic institutes, those centers of excellence, and make sure that they are the algorithms and the tools that our everyday technologies are adopting, and they don't just stay in those small spheres.
Great. So much to talk about when it comes to creating a national strategy that's going to close this divide and open up new opportunities. I want to thank you, Andrea, Phyllis, Cynthia, and Kathleen for joining us on this panel today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.